Hello everybody. This is the first video of many videos of the video series from zero to pawn, in which I want to go through the basic setup of your environment to test and exploit virtual machines or any other machine or any other host. And today I want to start with how to set up VirtualBox, which we will use later on for our Kali Linux and any other vulnerable VM we want to exploit. Now, VirtualBox, which you can find under virtualbox.org, is available for Windows and for Linux as well. And the installation, I will not cover the installation. The installation is very, very simple. On Linux, you just use your package manager and look for VirtualBox and everything. You will find everything there. On the Windows, you just go to virtualbox.org and download the package. Click next several times, and that's it. And the window itself, VirtualBox itself, looks the same under Windows and Linux. So what I'm showing you here is under Linux, but it will be the same under Windows as well. So the first thing we want to do is we open the VirtualBox Manager, and this step is optional, but I like to set up an additional folder for all my VMs where I will store the disk, image files, and so on. So you go to Preferences, and the first menu you see default machine folder. This is where all the virtual machines will be stored. You don't have to change that, but you can if you want to. Like I said, I like to have a special folder just for that, but that's optional, of course. Now, after you did that, you can go through all the other options here and can change stuff like here the shortcuts and so on. You don't need to do that. If you just install it, then you could technically start right away. If you're using a proxy, for example, in a university or anything, then that's the point here under proxy where you would need to put in your proxy details. I'm not using one, so we'll leave it in the default setting. Okay, so now the first thing we want to do is we want to download the Kali Linux image file. I will not show you how to do that. I guess you know how to download the image file. Just go to Kali Linux and download the 64-bit image. Then when that is done, you go to New, because you want to create a new machine. And you can give it any name you want. Let's call it Kali Linux. And the type is Linux, of course. And the version, we go to Debian 64-bit. And click on Next. And now for the system memory, you can go with the recommended memory size of 1 gig or 1024 megabyte. If you can, of course, that depends on your notebook or on your computer. If you can, I would say give it at least 2 gig of RAM, just because everything is a bit more fluid. You know, if you have a bit more RAM inside. If you want, you can also give it 4 gig if you're doing heavy lifting stuff on your Kali Linux machine. Otherwise, I always like to go with at least 2 gig. Now, for this installation right now, and because I have enough free RAM available, I will go with 4 gig. But like I said, that depends on your hardware and how much else you have running. Now, when we decided on the RAM size, we click on Next. And now we get to the virtual hard disk. Now, Kali Linux itself is a live CD or DVD or live system. So that means it's not intended to be installed on a hard disk. For example, you're always using the root user, which is not very secure. Several security options are disabled because they would get in the way of pen testing. So that means if you're going to install Kali Linux, remember that the system itself is very insecure, and you should treat it like that. So everything coming out of that system and getting onto your real computer should be treated as insecure and not safe if you're going to install it. You don't have to add a hard disk if you're going to use Kali Linux as live system. If you want to, for example, because you're going to compile a lot of stuff on that system, then it makes sense to install it and set it up the way you want it. Now I want to install it, so I click on create a virtual hard disk now. Click on create. We don't need to worry about what kind of hard disk we want to create. We just click on next. And then here we can choose we want to have a dynamically allocated hard disk or a fixed size hard disk. So the difference is or can be found here in those two texts, but basically it means dynamically allocated means on your actual hard disk only the space used will be written. So for example, that means when you start the VM, you will only have like a few kilobytes of space taken away, and this will grow over time while you're writing stuff on the hard disk. That's of course most of the time I would say that's the better option, simply because you can over provision VMs. You could, for example, I could give this VM 2 terabytes of hard disk or even more, and without even having actual 2 terabyte of free space on my notebook. Now the fixed size option is a bit faster simply because it's already allocated, but this also means if I want to give my VM a hard disk of 100 gigabytes, then it will take up 100 gigabytes from the start from my actual hard disk. So if you're not running VirtualBox and a potato, I would always recommend go with dynamically allocated. Now we want to change it. 8 gig is a bit small, so let's say 100. But like I said, I could also go up to 2 terabytes and even add more hard disks later on if I want to, but we will not need that. So 100 gig is enough. So click on create, and that's it. Now we want to change a few other things before we start. So we go to settings, and we go down to system, and we disable floppy because we don't need it anymore. Then we go to the processor. That depends on your system again, but I like to give it all I have. So it would be 4 CPUs. And then we go down to storage. And you see here empty CD-ROM. This is where you actually select the downloaded Kali Linux image file. Now you click on the little icon here, choose virtual optical disk file. I already selected it before, so I have it as option here. But that's basically what you do. You select your image file, click on OK, that's it. And now we go down to audio. You can disable audio or leave it enabled, that's up to you. Then we go down to network, and now the important part. Basically, we have 3 options for VM when it comes to network. First, we have network address translation, which basically means your VM has internet access without accessing your local network. Then we have the bridged adapter, which in short means that your VM will get an IP from your real router in your network. And if you want to, you could also access it from your notebook through this IP or from any other notebook, or the other way around. Then we have the internal network, which means that the network is only internally. So that means you will not be able to access that network either from the internet or from your computer. And also the other way around, the VM will not be able to get to the internet or to anything in your network. Now, for the installation, of course, we need internet access to download updates and so on. So we will go with net. And that's basically it. You can change a few other things here, like USB, serial port, shared folders, and the user interface. We don't need anything of that, so we just click OK. And then click on Start. Now, like I said, we want to install Kali Linux, so we click Install. Now we can choose the language and the time zone and the key map to use. Basically, you can always hit enter and you will have the English keyboard. Okay, now for the host name, you can choose anything you want. It doesn't really matter. I like to go with the default option, which is Kali. Then I click continue. The domain name, you could leave it empty. You can put in anything you want. So we call it local. Hit continue. Now the password. Don't use anything here which are using for anything else. Just use a simple password, just an easy one you can remember. Now, like I said, the time zone. Okay, now the partitioner is going to ask you how you want to partition the disk. Because for me this is like a throwaway system. I don't really care much. I just go with the laziest and easiest option, which would be one big partition, use the whole disk, which would be guided, use entire disk. Of course, you can set it up as however you want, but the easiest one would be guided, use entire disk, and just hit enter all the time. Now select disk to partition. We only have this one, so easy part. And all files in one partition. And then we hit finish and click on hit yes. Now it's going to take some time. I would say like 15 minutes, and after around 10 minutes it will ask you to select the proxy. Now after a while the installation will ask you to use a network mirror. We say yes, and if you have a proxy you can put it in here now. If not, you hit continue. Then afterwards you're asked to install the group bootloader. Now because we only have one hard disk, we just hit yes all the time. That means yes, and then we have to select the hard disk. There's only one, so that's easy, and then hit yes, and then the installation is complete, and you just hit continue and the VM will reboot. Now after the reboot you will see a login window where we put in the username root, then the password you put in before, now as you can see, or not, we have our standard Kali Linux running. There are a few things we want to do after the installation. For example, update all packages, change the resolution, and maybe set up a few other things like the battery saving options. But the last two steps are optional. The first one, to update the system, is recommended. So the first one we want to do is install a few packages. So we open the terminal and then we type in apt-get install linux -headers $, and then in brackets uname space -r. Okay, if you get a message which says unable to log, that means there's an update process running in the background. In this case, I don't like to wait, so I just do a reboot. Then we try the same thing again, linux -headers $, brackets uname -r, and hit enter. Alright, then you just hit Y for yes, and then wait. Now after all of that is done, we need a reboot before we continue. So we reboot the whole machine again. Okay, then we want to put in the VirtualBox guest editions, which are simply a compilation of drivers and so on to allow us to change the resolution on the fly of the virtual machine. So we click on devices on the virtual machine, insert guest edition CD image, which will put it on the virtual CD drive. And you can try to run, but it will probably not work from here. So what we need to do is open another terminal and then switch to the folder media/cd-rom, And if you do a ls for list, you should see a few files. The one we need is the vbox additions.run, so we want to run that file. Now this will build additional kernel modules and a few other things. You just have to wait. Now after that's done, you reboot the machine. And the next thing we need to do is upgrade the rest of the system, so upgrade all the other packages that are left. Now to do that, we simply type in apt minus get update and apt minus get upgrade minus y and apt minus get list minus upgrade minus y, and put a reboot at the end. Now what this will do is upgrade all the packages which need an upgrade, and then reboot at the end. This will take a while, so just leave it running. At the end of the upgrade, there will probably be a message box asking you if you want to allow Wireshark be used by non-privileged users, and if you want to upgrade packages while the system is running. Alright, and another thing, or the last thing I like to do, is if you, for example, you're creating a report on your Kali Linux VM, you need to have a way to get it out of your VM and to use it on your real computer, right? So what we're going to do is use the shared folder from VirtualBox. To do that, we click on machine, click on settings, and under shared folders we click on plus. Now before you do that, you should create a folder on your real computer, and we're going to select that folder. Now we want to auto mount that folder and make it permanent, and we hit OK and OK again. Now we need to have a folder on Kali Linux as well to save those files. Now I created one here in the home directory of root and just call it shared, and we will use this folder. You can put it anywhere you want. I just like to have it here under home. Now we open another terminal and we type in mount -t VirtualBox shared folder, or SF, and now we need the name of the actual folder on your real computer. So I called it Kali_shared, and now we need the path to the folder on your virtual machine. So that would be root and shared, and we hit enter, and then you should see a new mount on your virtual machine, this one here. And if we try to put anything in there, you should see that folder on your Kali Linux machine as well. Now that's nearly it. I have one more thing I want to show you, and that is the internal DHCP server for internal networks. Now on default, if you install a virtual machine and you select the internal network for your network adapter, you will have no IP. You will have to set one. This is a problem if you're going to if you're trying to exploit vulnerable machines which you downloaded from VulnHub, for example. Those will not have an IP, and you will need a DHCP server to get one. To do that, we close or bring down the VM and open a terminal or a CMD window on Windows and type in the following text. Now you see here netname int net, that's the internal network. You could name that anything you want, but you have to use the same name for the internal network later on. The first IP, the 10.10.10.1, is the IP of the DHCP server. The lowest IP is this one here, the lower IP. Now if you hit enter, you should get no output at all, then you know it worked. And the next videos I will show you how to set up a vulnerable machine and how to exploit it.